Welcome to the August Park and Rec Commission meeting, and welcome also to those who are present here with us, including Mayor Boisman and former Commissioner Dennis Bourne and Bob Skillings. We should take a look at the agenda and approve that, or note if there are any additions or changes.
So moved.
Second. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, been motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion's carried. The minutes of July 10. Any comments to those minutes? Is there a motion to adopt?
I make that motion.
A second.
Motion and supported. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carried. The next item would be the July 2017 Department Activity Report, and I would just like to point out and ask, I note that the annual memberships are down very slightly, but it looks like the punch cards are up dramatically. Is there some background behind that we could, it looks like business is up and some, could you flesh that out a little bit?
Sure. The memberships, they fluctuate based on the time of the year. Also, with the senior population, because a lot of them are snowbirds, and so when they come back in the spring, they have to re-up. And so it takes a while for them all to switch over from their facility, from where they were at in the winter to the summer. And so there usually is a little gradual climb in those spring months. And as far as the punch cards go, people they enjoy the freedom of being able to come when they want and not have to worry about them expiring. And so they like the flexibility that those have to offer. We also get individuals who have memberships that are 3-month or annual, but have children that may not come as often as they do. And so they like using those punch cards because then again, they're not committing to a full year and they don't expire, and so. it's
And
the
those are up by
flexibility.
over 1,000, it looks like.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming that means that income should be up significantly?
our revenues are up, yes.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions about the activity report? And then we would order that to be filed. Director Schmitz, you would have the city council recap?
Certainly. Thank you, Vice Chair Sledadal and Commissioners. The July 18th City Council meeting saw the council accept donations, authorize the Hermanfest liquor license, authorized the conversion of tennis courts to pickleball courts in Lincoln Park, awarded the German Park Playground Replacement Project, and conducted a 2018 budget work session prior to their city council meeting back on July 18. The August 1st city council meeting had nothing specific to Park and Rec on the agenda. So that's kind of a update of what the city council's been looking at from Park and Rec over the past month.
Any questions to Director Schmitz? Okay, and thank you. Moving on to the old business, would you have an update on the renew option sales tax, Director Schmitz?
I just have one short little tidbit, and that is a staff meeting has been scheduled with administrative staff on Tuesday, September 19 at 1 p.m. here at City Hall. I think that may include Council President Schmitz also. That's one tidbit of activity, and then I think beyond that, I would anticipate a full council work session scheduled at some time after that point. So that's all the information I have related to renew updates.
Is that meeting set up to talk about like a future plan, like laying out the structure of the way we move, or not sure?
I think it's reiterating kind of the basics of what decisions need to be made and what options may exist and what further information may need to be obtained in order for the council to make informed decisions on how to move forward.
Okay.
So that will be here at 1 o'clock, scheduled in the council chambers. I presume it's an open meeting, and more information, I imagine, will be coming out.
Will that meeting include bond counsel? Somebody from a bond firm that can,
I think there's going to be some information brought in related to some of those details, yes. I'm not organizing the meeting. It's being assembled by the city manager. And so I don't have I haven't seen the full agenda at this point yet. But I'm happy to see some movement as far as planning meetings go. And then beyond that, like I say, I would anticipate a full council work session scheduled after that September 19th meeting at some point.
okay. Thank you for the update. Item number 7 is the 2018 fee schedule. Director Schmitz?
Thank you, Vice Chair Slededall and Commissioners. You have before you the staff recommended proposed 2018 Park and Recreation fee schedule, along with the basic philosophies that you have seen before you in previous years of working towards affordability, adjusting for inflation, recouping costs wherever feasible, considering a partial subsidy for youth activities rather than adult, and then also small increases are preferred, regular small increases over a few large increases. So there's a number of items under the primary issues and alternatives to consider. And right off the bat here, I'd like to mention there's 2 items that staff is recommending we take off the table at this point. And that is under item 2E. We have been studying a lock-in fee at the recreation center for youth groups, and we are actually not quite complete with that research. So even though we have a proposed lock-in fee in our staff recommended fee schedule, we're proposing taking that off the table at this point in time, something we can bring back in the future or possibly even a year from now. And the next item under 3 admissions and memberships, F, we are continuing to look at our definition of memberships at the recreation center. Certainly the single or one person is well defined, but the double, such as individual, adult, and spouse, and the multi-membership are a couple of membership categories that we're still doing research on how we might further refine those and define them for staff and for customers. So that research is not complete. So we would propose continuing as is, and our present policy for these multi-memberships simply is residents of the same address. So parents, children, or residents that live together at one address. So other than that, there's modest increases in some areas to keep up with inflation. We have some fee categories that we recommend increase by 25 cents so that we don't have to deal with pennies, nickels, and dimes for admission at the recreation center or, for instance, Herman Monument. That we recommend increases by a quarter, 25 cents every X number of years. And you can see that here in our explanation. So you did have this preliminarily in your lap a month ago. Had some time to think about it. And now we have what staff is considering an appropriate adjusted fee schedule for 2018. If you're willing to recommend that be forwarded to the finance department and the city council, staff is ready to do that. Or if you prefer further discussion, it could be tabled up to 1 month. We would need to take action no later than our September meeting.
Thank you for that background, and with that, we have the action item in front of us.
I guess I'm okay with it. It's unfortunate that we have to bill for everything we do, but how else do you make ends meet, So I would make a motion to approve as presented.
I would second it. Kind of feel the same way. It's too bad, but
We have a motion and a second. I guess I'd just like to add, I think staff is very actively engaged with trying to bring in as many youth to the activities in the community as they can, with various activities that are free and otherwise supported by others in the community. And so I appreciate that sensitivity and endeavor on their part. Is there any further discussion before we vote?
Just one comment, I want to give kudos to the park department. I mean, a lot of these have been flatlined for 2 to 3 years, and modest increases of a quarter, 50 cents, or even $3 for redoing a baseball field. I don't think that's ridiculous at all. I think it's fantastic.
Any further discussion or observations? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion's carried. The next item is the South Goosetown Park. Director Schmitz?
Excuse me, Vice Chair, I think we're
Our
on
budget.
the
Bud-
2018 budget.
Budget.
Let's see.
Gotcha. I was
here.
thinking
That is,
schedule and budget, and they were both the same thing in my mind. We have yes, we have the budget in front of us.
Yes, item
Okay.
number 8, Commissioners. Basically, where we're at with the annual budget process is that staff has presented its initial department budget request to the finance director, and the finance director is compiling all the various departments' initial request in preparation of her meeting with the city manager. I don't think she's met with the city manager yet, but that will be taking place in August. And then in September, a preliminary budget is presented to the city council for their adoption as the preliminary budget. So you see a list of items here under budget and fiscal issues. These are items that I have and staff has initially requested be considered by city administration for the 2018 budget. And I'm going to point out some big ones, of course, so some of the highlights. First of all, the Herman Heights retaining walls, the limestone retaining walls on Center Street at Herman Heights Park. We're proposing elimination of those and simply slope that area similar to the diocesan slope on 5th North. So it can be mowed and maintained much more safely than the old limestone block walls that are presently there. So that's estimated at $200,000. The next big ticket item is Harmon Park to finally try to replace the light, or plans to replace the field lighting on Field 1. That's the Garden Street field, the original ball field at Harmon Park, for $200,000. The wooden poles are too short, and the light fixtures are inefficient. And the underground wiring and infrastructure is long outdated. So it would be new towers and new wiring infrastructure and LED lighting. Along with that, we would propose doing replacing the lights on Field 3, the newer ball field, and the ice rink lights, which are metal halide, to go to LED to significantly reduce kilowatt consumption. Glockenspiel has a recommended $90,000 in next year's budget. You're well aware of the fact that we're regularly replacing figurines. We have 20-some figurines, original kind of paper mache figurines that should have been replaced a couple decades ago. And they're just under $10,000 a piece to have those replaced with custom epoxy fiberglass figurines that will last for decades. So that's four in that proposed budget for $40,000, and then $50,000 to replace the original analog controller with a new digital controller the size of a cell phone instead of the size of one of these desks of the digital the analog controller. And then a variety of kind of regular items, replacing fitness equipment, floor scrubbers, and so on. But the next big ticket item, of course, is the splash pad. We don't necessarily, we've got, the staff has an idea where we think it might work well in our system, but we are not identifying the specific park at this point. But we do feel that it's appropriate to add a splash pad to our system as soon as 2018. And that's a zero depth. It's basically a playground with water squirting out of it. So it's a place for people to cool off all summer, all ages, accessible and inclusive. And that's estimated at $205,000. So there's really no action necessary at this point from the commission. There's a possibility that administration and staff tweak our initial request or modify our initial department request before it goes to the council in September. And so I'll have more detailed information at our September meeting. And you can certainly decide to take formal action then, or in October or November. Change can take place after the preliminary budget is adopted by the council until it's finally adopted at the second meeting in December annually. So we still have almost a half a year, or 4 or 5 months to modify or adjust our 2018 budget. So if you have any questions or comments, we're all ears, and we'll try to answer any questions you may have.
And one comment I want to bring up, I know I had brought it up to this board a month or two ago, is that Vision 2020 board that does work on Riverside Park. The reason I want to bring it up is it's long been talked about the observation deck and ADA compliable, the Franklin School Building. The reason I'm bringing it up is tomorrow night, council will also be looking at hiring a firm to cover the city. Are we ADA compliant? From our ped ramps to our buildings to our, so eventually, it's going to be coming back to the Park and Rec. What do you want to do? How do you want to handle getting the Franklin School accessible? And that's the reason I'm bringing it up, is tomorrow night they're going to hire a firm to blanket the city. Where are we not compliant and where are we compliant?
Yes, the former Franklin School Building at Riverside Park certainly is in need of a variety of updates, including accessibility. Staff has been chipping away at smaller improvements and updates to the facility, and will continue to do so over the next year or two. Some of these major elements, such as the observation deck on the east side, the riverside, and accessibility into the building, and park restrooms. Riverside Park is an original park and a very important, valuable park in our system, and it doesn't have restrooms, a restroom facility. And so we're studying the feasibility and possibility of putting that in the lower level of that building. And that needs some more time with study and research and architectural services and accessibility experts. In some elements, the historic aspect, where we need to make sure that we're keeping in mind, the historic nature of the structure with a variety of different improvements that we have hoped for. So that's why it's not a big ticket item in here for next year from staff, because we don't have the approvals from the Historical Preservation Commission and other historical agencies or organizations, along with, we don't have an architectural rendition or concept with price estimates yet. We hope that over the course of the next 6 to 8 months, we can come up with that information so that maybe next year at this time, we have a handle on what kind of funds we would need for accessibility and updates to that building. Another aspect is that we are working towards being designated by the state as a regionally significant park, Riverside Park. And once we're designated as regionally significant, we're eligible for legacy grants. You are not eligible for Minnesota State legacy grants unless you're a designated regional facility. And so our first step is to get that designation, which we're working on, and it could take us another year yet. But I firmly believe that Riverside Park and our Minnesota River Parkway, Minnicon Park also are eligible, or should be eligible, for legacy grants once we get designated as regionally significant parks by the state. So that's a little information on Riverside Park and the Minnesota River Parkway.
Thank you for those updates. So are you suggesting that we can move on from this item for now and pending unless the commission has further?
Yes, no action necessary. Please submit comments to myself or our office between now and the next meeting, and we'll see what we bring to you next month.
Any further observations from the commission? Okay. Then we will move on to the next item, which is number 9, and the South Goosetown Park. Director Schmitz.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slitedall and Commissioners. This item comes to you through resident and former Commissioner Dennis Bourne. And this is to just remind the Commission and in hopes of taking future action for this part of our community. So I'm recommending you receive Dennis Bourne's request and information and update to the potential of a Southern Goosetown Park, and we can discuss it at this point. I know there's still a number of details that we would need to be worked out before we could the City Council could ultimately take action. So it certainly would warrant one or more work sessions yet in the future. So I think discussing it now and tabling it for future action is appropriate. You have quite a bit of information here in the overview, in the action form. This South Front Street, South Valley Street area, we're very familiar with. Mr. Bourne is pointing out again that there are residential lots available from a willing seller that staff has not met with yet, but resident Dennis Bourne certainly has, and there's this possibility of I would call it a pocket park, and that is feasible for a small pocket park and playground in these 2 residential lots that Mr. Bourne has presented to us. You also have on page 18 of 20 in the packet this PDF, this aerial photo that you've seen before of city-owned property from 13th South Street downriver southward to 20th South Street, including the putting green site and the city-owned berm, where there's quite a bit of real estate, quite a bit of city-owned land that could have possibly enough space for a small neighborhood park or a pocket park. And the proposed trail on top of the river berm, the city-owned Minnesota river berm.
I guess I'd like to see, I spoke with a community development director, and he's familiar with this, what's been going on for the last couple of years. If we could do, I know the Park and Rec meets once a month, but it'd be like a mini work session. So Mr. Schnobrick could actually come down, explain to the Park and Rec. It's not just that we approve it, city's gonna go buy the park property. There's a few hoops to go through and what the options are. I mean, I'd like to
Yes.
see just a mini work session. It's open to the public.
Yes.
That's my recommendation.
Yeah, it may require a modification to the city's comprehensive plan.
Correct.
And certainly land acquisition is requires council action. So there certainly would be a number of formal steps that would need to take place prior to putting a city-owned pocket park in these 2 residential lots. But like I said, there's still, there are other areas and other elements for discussion in our South Goosetown area.
Would the former putting green park, would that qualify for meeting the requirements of being within it looks like it's within the 4 blocks too. I don't know from everything, I don't know how your 4 blocks go from,
Right. No, not every resident would be within, the 3 or 4 blocks recommended to a park, depending upon where it was placed in South Goosetown. The comprehensive plan does talk about the South End Mobile Village, mobile home park, not being within 4 blocks of a city park either. So there really are a few areas in our community that don't meet the comprehensive plan guideline for proximity to city park.
Well, I'm not so certain personally that I like the 2 lots together, the lots 3 and 4 in the middle of a block. Somebody might construe that the neighbors just put up a nice park. Would you go use that as a public park? It might be identified as such, but I'm not so certain I would be as comfortable being between 2 houses, or that the homeowners would be so excited to have a park right next to them. I mean, I don't know that.
That's certainly an element and a component in this discussion.
Dennis Bourne has been a longtime advocate for a park, and Dennis is in the audience. Did you wish to address the commission, Dennis?
Dennis Bourne, 711 South Front Street. I hadn't planned on speaking, so I don't have anything prepared, but my basic philosophy was to have a small park for the 5 years and up kids to go to. There are a lot of them in that area. The putting green is way in the south end. There are only 2 blocks of residences that are within that 4-block distance. So it's really wouldn't be feasible to put it down there. And the trailer park is it's so far off geographically that you really have to address that separate, I think. The area in the 9th to 10th is vacant. There's a house on each corner, plus on Valley, there's another couple of them. Neighborhood parks are next to residences. That's where the kids are. And of the lots that are available, one will be split off from an adjoining owner if they agree to go along with this. The other is not using the lot. Then the two residences right next each have 3 lots. So these are the 2 middle ones, and they've got some buffer area. On Valley, it's gardens. So I don't know if you can find a better place that will not affect many people, and it's convenient for mothers and daycare operators to get kids down to that point. If you go to the city land along the berm, there is some available, but it's not conducive to mothers leaving their kids play there. If you want your 8 or 9-year-old going to the park on their own, you want it within visibility of other residences, so there's a safety factor there. I've looked at about everything that's available. The only playground in Goosetown right now is at Riverside Park. And that's 18 blocks from the south end. Now, I live on 7th, and we're just right on the edge of that 4-block distance. And going down to 9th and 10th, we'd be on the other edge of that distance. So it's not right in the center, so everybody is within 4 blocks, but it's the only available one closest to the center. But I see, especially daycare, where they have 10 or 15 kids walking along the sidewalk trying to get to a place to play. The older kids get on their bikes and cross the tracks and go to the BMX track. Other than that, they have to bike down to Riverside Park. There's just nothing there. And my vision of this would be tuned for the younger ones, the 5-year-old on up or 2-year-old on up, whatever moms want to bring down there. And the equipment for kids in that age group, swings, slides, tunnels, and like a climbing web like you have at North Park, the new equipment at North Park. They wouldn't need the zip lines or anything like that. And I've gotten a catalog from, I think it's Landscape Structures. That's the people who make these things. And I think buying the land and getting equipment, and I don't know what it would cost to put down the surface. And I personally think the wood chips are fine for that kind of a park. But I've estimated it would be around $75,000 to $85,000, which is a heck of a lot cheaper than what you've been talking about here. Getting the land, my former job was buying land for the state, for management with the DNR. And there are techniques I'm able to use that maybe the city can't use, that I as a private citizen can use. But I do have one landowner who, when I talked to him almost a year ago, would be willing to donate part of the value in return for putting a family name on the park. So that's an alternative that would cut the cost. It brings up a problem with the other landowner because there are 2 landowners, 2 different landowners. So that's something that the city negotiators would have to take care of. But that possibility is there. It would be nice to have it on Front Street, just because there are ways more away from the trains. And I mentioned I saw groups of kids. One bunch of them was right at 3rd Street and Valley, south. 2 locomotives were sitting there. The kids were stopped, getting ready to cross the street. The train didn't have to do this, but he blasted his horn, and three or four of the kids went down to their knees like that. They were just terrorized. And I want it far enough away so we can, if we have to put up a sound wall. There's a parking room on the map I drew out, the air photo. Parking room off the alley, besides having the 80 by 100 playground area, or they can park on Front Street. But a sound wall along there would help. It wouldn't have to be very high. Other than that, I've tried to cover all the bases. Do you have any questions of myself?
Any questions for Mr. Bourne?
Oh,
Thank you for-
that's not a good sign. Do it when you can get it done. It's been going on a long time. I know when I was a commissioner 2 or 3 years ago, we did pass a resolution approving a park down there. And it would be nice to finish up the job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, any further action here as we've considered this item?
Well, Vice Chair Slattedahl and Commissioners, what I will do with staff is some further research, including administration staff here at City Hall, and then propose a work session in the not-too-distant future to review all the information we have and the various possibilities. And so, Mr. Bourne's done a lot of research, and we thank him for that. And it's a fact that this part of town is underserved by a city park. So it's one of many things on our plate, but it's an important item on our plate. And you will see some more information coming from staff in the not-too-distant future.
With that being said, I'd like to motion to receive Dennis Bourne's request and then have the Park and Rec Director schedule us in the near future the information in a work session on the proposed Goosetown area park.
I'd second that.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded to adopt this this resolution and along with scheduling a work session. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the motion carries. Okay, that finishes up the old business. New business, we have one item number 10, on Johnson and Mueller Park baseball advertising. Director Schmitz?
Thank you, Vice Chair Slattedahl and Commissioners. You have before you the initial request from the New Ulm Baseball Association to operate an advertising program in Johnson and Mueller Parks. My recommendation is to receive this request and discuss it, possibly include it in a work session, and then table for future action. I'm not recommending that you make a decision to forward onto the City Council at this moment. In addition to that, you see in the action form in the overview that our only other authorized advertising program in the system is at the Civic Center. And it's actively being operated in the south arena of the Civic Center. The department was generating about $7,000 per year in revenue from the advertising program that the city operated. And then in September of 2016, it became an article in the lease agreement between the junior hockey franchise, the New Ulm Steel, and the city for them to operate the advertising program in the South Arena. In exchange for them operating that program, they, in the lease agreement, that article included a fee, a cost to the city from the New Ulm Steel hockey team to the city of $7,000. And then any revenue above and beyond that, of course, would be revenue for the New Ulm Steel hockey team. So, like I say, nowhere else in our system do we have an advertising program of this nature. The Baseball Association does not have a lease agreement. They're simply a per-game customer, as our other organizations are throughout the system. And so under the budget and fiscal issues, and you can see that in the letter from Bob Skillings, president of the association, their initial request would include them keeping 60% and offering 40% of the revenue. I don't know if that's net revenue or gross revenue, but a 60-40 split, 60% to the association and 40% to the city, and really not requiring the city to expend any resources of time, labor, or effort on installing advertising at the two parks. So you also have the letter before you, and Mr. Skillings, president of the association, is here in the audience. I recommend that we have discussion in hopes of future action on this topic.
I got one question for you, Bob.
Thank you for your invitation. Bob Skillings, President of the New Ulm Baseball Association.
I know this is one question. If the Park and Rec recommends it to go to City Council, have you contacted any other municipalities? Is this similar to what they do with their ballparks? 'Cause I mean, I've seen a lot of ballparks. You see the advertising. Is it similar, or?
Well, it would be some ballparks would be, city generated
Right.
income. Others would be an association like ours.
But I mean, have you looked at other municipalities, Mankato, a Gale, or
Sleepy Eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about it?
Is this similar to what they're doing?
Yes, what we're proposing is to continue making improvements at Mueller Park.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, I think, would be to make it more colorful, and having outfield advertisements on the fence going around the outfield would definitely, make it more attractive. Now, we feel very strongly to not do that at Johnson Park. We have the ivy, and you overlook the valley and all that. So we wouldn't want to do the same thing at Johnson Park. But Mueller Park, I think, would be an added improvement. Not to mention generating revenue on a regular basis.
All right, thank you.
Now, sure. At Johnson Park, our idea is that there are some places within that park where advertising would be appropriate. Maybe inside the grandstand in different places. The back of the grandstand where the new restrooms are could be another place. So there are some places, I think, within Johnson Park where advertising could be placed.
How much do you think you'd generate on that? I don't know what a sign like that would cost. I suppose it depends on the size,
I think
obviously.
there's about, we figured there's roughly about 70 spots at Miller Park, and, 200, that's 14,000 a year.
Okay.
Whether 200 would be the right number or not, I think we could find out what's happening other places and find the right price. But I think one of the arguments sort of against an association doing something like this is that it would open up a can of worms, and every association would want to do the same thing. Well, we feel that if we would do it as volunteers and take care of everything, and then share a significant portion of it with the Park and Rec Department, with the city, that would be worthwhile. And so whether every group would be willing to do that or not, I don't know, but we would be willing to do all the work involved. And if you think about it, if you have staff do it, that there's a cost to that as well.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't Johnson Park. I don't know.
No way.
Yeah,
No way.
that looks
Not
nice.
happening.
I like that park the way it is,
need
to be
that
honest, so,
Ivy, that looks great.
yeah. So,
Director Schmitz mentioned that the revenue split, he didn't know if that was gross or net, and could you address the initial cost for putting up the advertising? How would that be met?
We would bear all those costs, and in terms of 60-40 split on the profit, I guess is what I'm thinking.
On the profit.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But we would, as part of the cost, we wouldn't put our time in there as far as volunteers go. Okay, it would just be the materials that it would take.
Mm-hmm. Any further questions for Mr. Skillings?
Well, the first year is where the costs would come in. Because them things, if you take them back down like we want to, right? We're gonna save that initial cost a long time. Because it only weathers for 3 months or so, 3.5, then you take it down again. All the other ballparks, they actually leave them up because they're plywood.
Yeah, we would be looking at vinyl signage.
Yeah, we would. We want to take it back down because then it would weather better.
Mm-hmm.
We would have to do the putting up and down. I mean, that would be volunteer.
so there's obviously an annual cost to put a sign up to
They
the,
have
to
to pay
the,
the
to the
after-
customer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think we're talking about a contract type thing, right? Yeah.
oh, so if you build them the sign that it will go up a few years without having to
No.
redo that sign,
Well, why
makes
wouldn't it?
sense,
It would
yeah,
make sense.
sure.
I know, I hate to say it, but my son, he does one up in Springfield. It's weird, but they asked him and he did it. So he had to pay the initial cost, and he has to pay one every year for at Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
Probably be better in New Ulm, but.
Support other
first-
communities too, huh?
They're the other one that asked him, so.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions?
One other question for Mr. Skillings, how soon does the Baseball Association, as soon as possible, granted, they want to know, correct?
Yeah, we would like to get work on in the off season if we can,
That's kind of what I thought.
and
Your
and
biggest-
to have it ready to go for the 2020 state tournament would be would definitely be our goal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Skillings.
you.
Mhm. All right, commissioners, we have the item in front of us.
So why were we gonna table it? Because we were gonna discuss it further at a work session, is that?
Well,
Because it's kind of listed as just a table.
right, commissioners, I just felt that this was such a significant, modification or change to our system that you might not want to receive the information and make a decision, in 20 minutes at one meeting. It might be something that maybe you have some more questions, or you'd like some more information or data, or
In my mind, I believe everybody sitting on this commission, we've all been to the Ball Diamonds, from the Twins game to the Wild game to the Viking game to the Springfield Ballpark. They all have signage. I don't even, as a councilman, I don't have an issue okay, we recommend doing this, send it to the council, we'll get the answer. If they want more info, they'll kick it back to you. I mean, that's just my take on it, that we've all been to those ball diamonds where you see the signage. It's there.
I think it's more, makes the ballpark look a little more like a baseball field, not just like without nothing, it's just nothing. I mean, they just don't have a lot of pizzazz.
Baseball has a long history of signage.
I know. I mean, I just went, and not to change it, but I went to my daughter, she lives in Blaine, and she's got the baseball field only a couple blocks from her, and that's got signage everywhere too. Over that green stuff like we put on at Mueller Park now. Looks nice. Kinda gets people's attention, I think.
I mean, with that being said, I make a motion to receive the file and order the Park and Rec Director to prepare a request for action council form. Won't be on tomorrow night, but at the next city council meeting. I don't think it'll be that big of a discussion. It'll be yes or no, let's do it at Mueller Park.
And that would be, your motion would involve striking the mention here of tabling. But
Correct. I mean, to receive and then,
action.
yep,
Okay.
receive the file and order the Park and Rec Director to prepare a request for action council form to the city council on this matter.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us.
I would second that.
Motion and seconded. I think everyone has heard the motion, and it's in front of us here with that one change of removing the item about tabling. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion's carried. That brings us to the reports section, and Director Schmidt, the report and updates.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sledadall and Commissioners. I'm not going to read into the record all the information here that's in the packet on the agenda for completed projects, projects that are in progress, and the other list that is still in a planning phase. If you have a specific question, please send it my way. Staff is working hard to try and complete things we don't want to try to do in the winter. We're pushing hard on summer construction and preparing for the next season. Baseball is over, at least at Johnson and Miller, and now we're preparing the field of Johnson Field for football. One very interesting element down at Johnson Football Field is that we're relocating flag football, youth flag football, from North Park to Johnson Field because we can have 4 games going on at once of little people running around as opposed to simply 3 on the 3 baseball fields in North Park. So we're anticipating a lot of excitement to see the little people running around on the big football field, flag football down at Johnson. The other item I'd like to point out is the brochure. This is the autumn and winter brochure, hot off the press, and registration began today at 10 a.m. online with credit cards. I don't know if we have any kind of an update. Sometimes we do, but I know there's been a flurry of activity with people signing up for swim lessons and all the other various activities offered in the autumn and winter brochure. Another thing I'd like to point out is we have 2 Eagle Scout candidates that we're working with now, including Glenn Howell, working on some improvements in one of our urban wilderness areas, Adams Park, and the Nature Trail, and then Connor Shopper working with some improvements out at North End, Pollinator Park. So we appreciate the cooperation we have with the scouting community. Any questions or comments whatsoever on information from staff?
Any questions for staff? If not, thank you, Director Schmitz.
Thank you.
Are there any commissioner reports? Hearing none, we've reached the end of the agenda, I believe, and our next meeting will be September 11th at 4 p.m. And we will, with that, adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.